Welcome back, everybody. David here, joined by Matt, as always. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, David. Good to be with you.
I'm very excited for this. I mean, I wish it was under better circumstances. We have Gus Bova on the program. I've been a fan of Gus Bova's writing for a long time, and the great work that they do at Texas Observer. Gus, thank you so much for joining us on Left Reckoning today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, for people who've been watching Left Reckoning for the past few years, we've been covering a lot of what Elon Musk's companies coming to Texas has meant for working class Texans in particular. And this story that just dropped yesterday by Gus in the Texas Observer really paints, in my opinion, a very harrowing picture of some of the human cost to this kind of move fast, ignore a lot of the dangers and potential consequences from these actions that have come with a lot of Musk's companies, from Tesla to SpaceX. But people should read this piece. He died helping build Tesla's Gigafactory. Tesla didn't tell local officials. Gus, could you tell the listeners who Telmo Ramirez was?
Yeah, he was a 57-year-old man, a father and grandfather, who'd also recently remarried just a year before the incident we're about to talk about. He was living down in the valley in Starr County, but he had traveled to the Austin area to work on the construction site of the soon-to-be Tesla Gigafactory, just southeast of Austin proper. And this was September 2021. He was new to that job site. Even though it was late September, it was a hot Texas day. It got up to 96 degrees. They were working with concrete, preparing a concrete pour of some kind. And around mid-afternoon, he began to show these symptoms: confusion, rambling, sort of at one point, kind of just wandering off, confused about where he was, seemingly. All of this, it became clear pretty soon, were the symptoms of heat stroke, or hyperthermia is the technical cause of death from the medical examiner for him. But basically, the heat and the work together had overwhelmed his body's cooling mechanisms. And this is something that can sneak up even on an experienced construction worker, because once your kind of circulation and perspiration systems fail, you can get up above 105 degrees in minutes. And that is what happened. And although they did take him to a Tesla, he was working for a Tesla contractor called Bell Plan Services. But his direct employer was a Tesla contractor, not Tesla itself. But he was then taken to Tesla's on-site medical trailer. They attempted CPR, but it was too late. And so he was pronounced dead out there in a trailer at the half-built site of the Tesla Gigafactory. So that's just to get started.
Yeah, no, I mean, I want to talk more about the heat and those conditions, both there and also just generally in the state of Texas. But I think it's really important to understand the scale here of this story, because something like this, there are reporting requirements, and in this aspect, who's responsible for reporting a death like this, and how was this incident reported at first?
So there's a couple aspects here. The story says, right in the headline, that Tesla didn't tell local officials, right? Mm-hmm. Now that refers to something that's kind of unique to this case, which is that when Tesla came here to Texas, to the Austin area, they did so with the help of tax breaks from both a school district and Travis County, which is where Austin is. And during the Travis County process, there was a lot of pushback from labor advocates and progressive advocates saying, one, we don't think these are necessary. Tesla doesn't need our tax breaks. And two, we're not comfortable with the level of worker safety provisions included in this deal. Travis County included some, but not all, of the requirements that advocates were asking for. One that was included was Tesla must report any injuries or deaths that occurred during construction of the Gigafactory. They then proceeded to, according to all the documents that I obtained, they proceeded to not report this man, Telmo Ramirez's death to the county, or a number of other injuries that I was able to find by basically combing through this big OSHA data file. I was able to find at least 6 more injuries they did not report to the county. I do not know if it was intentional concealment or what the motivation was, but the fact is they did not report it, and it will now be up to the county to decide whether they consider that to be a breach of their tax break agreement. The county has just told me that they're continuing to review the matter, and that because, well, they didn't say, but basically because I asked, they have asked Tesla to go back and provide the missing information. So that was, a minor impact of the story that happened while reporting it. There is another side to this, which is, I think, related to your question, which is on Telmo Ramirez's cause of death. So basically, I don't want to go way too into the weeds, but medical examiners do autopsies, and for biological reasons, it can be difficult for them to know that someone died of heat stroke, because basically they would have to get your temperature readings from the time that you died. Basically, the delay makes it difficult for them to diagnose. So they initially recorded it as the guy just had high blood pressure and plaque in his arteries, had a heart attack. That's it, just a heart attack. For some strange reason, EMS got their temperature data to the medical examiner later, months later, which led the medical examiner to change the cause of death to hyperthermia, which then leads to OSHA actually citing the employer for exposing the workers to unsafe temperatures, and lets the family of the man actually have some idea of what happened and then go file a lawsuit against Tesla and Belcan. All that happens because the medical examiner redoes their medical findings, basically. And the reason I explain all that detail is many of these cases go unrecognized in general. Many of these cases of workers dying of heat on the job go unrecognized altogether. So,
well, even mentioning like different sorts of comorbidities in a pretty like heinous way, and so much of this article, it's like the power of definition. Like, is a contractor? Is it a contractor or is it a worker? And that that leads to some fuzziness. Is it an accident or is it an injustice? And like you said, with all the this is why we need like state officials to come in and protect workers, because otherwise you have these things fall through the cracks. Like you said, like talk about like the reporting of these and like how much OSHA even tracks down of what is reported.
Yeah, I mean, so in theory, workplace deaths are reported to OSHA by employers. Employers, they will get in trouble if they're found to have not reported a death. Where that gets slippery is someone dies in a hospital however many hours or days after the workplace incident, and then the employer fails to report it then. Or in some cases, probably there's probably even more egregious cases of underreporting. Just like big picture numbers, there's one part of the federal government that uses a bunch of different methods to gather an overall figure of how many people die on the job in the United States, right? And one of their methods is basically asking employers to anonymously report whether they've had worker deaths. It's separate from OSHA. And their final count usually shakes out to around 5,000 a year, 5,000 on the job worker deaths a year. OSHA investigates like a fifth of that number. OSHA investigates like 1,000 a year. So one way or another, partially through underreporting, partially because of some weird bureaucracy, like mines are technically in a separate, but one way or another, there's way more deaths than death investigations for sure. And then if you want to drill down even further to how many heat deaths are actually correctly identified as heat deaths and investigated in that way, there you're looking at, I think I found, what did I find? 120 OSHA investigations over 6 years, whereas the group Public Citizen has an estimate that there are actually like 2,000 a year. So 120 versus like 10,000. That would be like the ratio of actual heat deaths versus how many get inspected by OSHA. And I'll just say it can be easy to beat up on OSHA. It's not really any type of. I'll just say it's an understaffed agency. It always
Yeah.
has been, I think, for obvious reasons. Overstretched, understaffed. You want them to pass rules, like they don't have an actual set of clear rules on heat, but there's intense industry opposition to that, incredible regulatory burden. When they've passed regulation on certain dangerous chemicals and stuff, it's taken decades sometimes for them to get a rule through. So imagine heat, which is a much bigger issue for employers to worry about. So
Right.
And I just want to say something really fast to the audience too on like the contractor aspect here, because like this is a really fundamental thing that you're seeing not just in Tesla facilities but all across the board, where you hire contractors to do the work. You hire a contracting company to do the work on your facilities, and then if things are happening, you're like, oh well, the contractor is responsible. And yes, that is the way it's typically treated legally. But in the same way that like if the contractor wasn't building the Gigafactory, for example, the way that Musk and Tesla wanted them to, in my opinion, they also do have responsibilities for the way that workers are being treated. And like this wasn't just like one isolated incident. There have been a lot of harrowing stories about what's happened building this Gigafactory. I know there's a big report a few months ago that was released by The Guardian about workers who are getting fake OSHA certification. Right, so this is something that was really endemic throughout the entire Gigafactory build out process.
Yeah. There have been there was prior reporting about both wage theft and falsified OSHA certificates, and there was also some prior reporting in More Perfect Union that alluded to this issue of the unreported injuries, but through a bunch of work, I was able to actually pin down specifics on which injuries, which companies, and things. So this has been like bubbling for a little bit. Plus, just if you've kind of just been around Austin, or if you have friends in unions and stuff, it's just kind of been in the water. Like you just been hearing people talk about sketchy things happening at that site, because so many people were in and out that site, and there was all little rumors were coming my way before I was ever able to get something I could actually do a story on, you know? So yeah. And as far as basically using contractors as a way out of any liability, that's obviously useful. That's a useful argument for a company like Tesla. But as a matter of fact, they can be legally liable for what happens on their site. And I think sort of the premise of everything that went into that Travis County agreement was Travis County is asking you to basically be responsible for what happens on this site. That's why they put in all these requirements of hire contractors that are women and people of color. All your contractors need to have workers' compensation insurance, which is not legally mandated in Texas, the only state in the union that doesn't require it. So they were putting in things that, were based on the premise of you're the owner, you're the developer of this site. I mean, the buck's got to stop somewhere. So.
And like there were, and again, like I mean, and in a little bit, I want to get more broad into talking about some of Musk's other companies and this move here, and like the way that his companies sort of interact with local and state governments. But like, don't forget, folks, that like the whole thing, at least from my perspective, being from here, living here, was when this factory came, was like this is going to be a gold mine for the community. This is going to provide a lot of jobs and all these kind of things. And like we had Bob Leibel on the show when he was running for county commissioner to talk about the deal, which I found a lot of it to be way too generous to this company, one of the wealthiest people in the world. But yeah, these like provisions in here were to sort of claw back and say like, no, we need these things to actually come through for people.
And I mean, I'm hoping now the story is out that the county judge or some commissioner will actually talk to me, because I mean, they just ran everything through their sort of official spokesperson for the story, and we're just very cautious, but they are all elected politicians. And I was sort of surprised, and had Bob won, I would have had someone to get a live interview with, but instead I just got kind of an anodyne statement from the county, though at least they acknowledged that they were, looking into it. So.
Well, I wanted to like focus a little bit, because like this is a story that is like it's frightening and it's horrifying, but also like I used to work concrete in the South, And I know how difficult it can be to deal with heat. I remember I worked in a non-unionized, facility, doing nothing as intense or industrial as this, just laying foundations for housing. But how much of a fight it was with our bosses, for example, say like, we need water breaks, right? It's 100 degrees outside. And knowing that there is this real threat that something horrible like this can happen. I mean, one thing that you note in your story, and I know a lot of advocates in Texas, across the board have been hitting at, is that like the heat deaths in Texas are out of control, even when you compare them to other places that have a lot of heat, that are hot places.
Yeah, because of that under recording issue again, it's probably a little more solid to look at like just construction deaths, knowing that a lot of those are heat deaths in there. But yeah, absolutely. It can, as an average, a construction worker is dying every 3 days or so in Texas, which is completely. I cut some numbers for certain years, and it was more than California and Pennsylvania combined. So that's like the most populous state and the 5th most populous state combined, and Texas was surpassing both of them. So it's a national problem, and it's a Texas specific problem too.
Yeah. So you don't have to be a smart person to realize that it's like, obviously it's a major concern here. And the fact that we do have, a state government for the most part, which is really, really slow to react to threats to working people. It only makes it worse.
It's, just from like, a couple thousand feet up or whatever, Texas's leaders have pretty openly been saying like, this is the cost we're willing to pay for our theory of economic growth, basically. That's kind of what they say every legislative session, every 2 years, session after session, when anyone demands. There's been a bill kicking around the Capitol for many sessions now to create a rest break requirement statewide, because Austin and Dallas both have municipal policies requiring rest breaks. And pretty much anyone will tell you that city by city is not the ideal way to pass and enforce policies like that. Statewide would be much better. Instead, they've rejected that bill year after year. And I think this week, the Senate will probably approve the House bill that's going to undo Austin and Dallas's rest break policies and basically make it almost across the board impossible for any cities to pass any progressive labor policies in Texas. So
I know we have a clip, I'm forgetting his name, live, of a Texas Republican attacking some of these crazy California and anti-business policies, like paid sick leave and things like that. It's rough. And like, again, for people who like don't follow Texas politics closely, like this is why like a lot of these fights, like a lot of things that I've written about for like Jacobin, have been about this war that we're seeing from the state level GOP on municipalities and on localities, because for a lot of people in cities like where the vast majority of people live, by the way, in the state, they do want there to be protections for workers, and they might feel foreclosed right now with the way that statewide politics are happening, but like these attempts from like the state level GOP to wage war and prevent cities and municipalities from basically being able to pass their own rules and regulations on how work is conducted on the state, really sets us back. I totally agree that patchwork way is not a solution, but like we're not even like, they're basically trying to prevent us from being able to do patchwork regulation or protections.
Precisely.